you hear just now is composed by Bach. It's the first violin sonata, second movement fugue. As we know, fugue is a form is always happening in the Baroque period, especially composed by Bach. So in the fugue we can see a different melody coming together and covered together. But it does not only happen in the Baroque period. I would say this fugue form is also happened in the Romantic music, classical music, even the new classic music and the modern music. Today we are going to talk about Stravinsky. Stravinsky, we will say he's a quite mixed composer. He composed Romantic music, new classical music, the modern music as well. But today we are more focused on what he's composing, the new classical music. So, at the beginning of the 20th century, there's two revolutions happened in Europe. One is France Revolution, and the other one is Russian Revolution. For Stravinsky was born in Russia. At that time, he was studying in Petersburg. Of course, studied law, and he started to study composition as well. But when the Russian Revolution happened, he must to leave Russia. Then he moved to Switzerland, and then he moved into Paris in France. Why people say the new classicism? Why people always connect the new classical music and the nationalism? Because for me, just because the new classicism, the new classical music happens, there are too many revolutions and society revolution happens in Europe. Not just these two revolutions. So that's why people do this connection between the nationalism and the new classicism. But today the piece I'm going to talk about, the piece I will going to talk is not that obviously to show you the nationalism. The piece is Stravinsky's D major violin concerto. This is the only violin concerto composed by Igor Stravinsky. As we know, Stravinsky is not a violinist and he don't know violin so much, so he asked his friend to help me to compose this concerto. In this concerto, if you just look at the beginning, you will find the character is quite similar to any 18th century classical music, such as like Mozart. Let me show you an example. So the next two examples is composed by Mozart. One is this. Another one is this. So these two pieces is the Mozart Symphony 39, fourth movement, and the first movement of the Mozart Symphony 40. So why I show you these two examples? Because if you look at the Symphony 39, it's almost like a fugue. As the first violin coming first, and then the rest of the orchestra playing together. It's like before and after. And the 40, you can see that the rhythm is very simple, just da 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 da. So in the classical music, they don't have too many difficult, tricky tempo or rhythm or chords in this. So same as the new classical music. In the Stravinsky violin concerto, at the beginning of the concerto, you will see he just used a very, very easy and simple rhythm, such as just like this. So if you look at the full score, you can see the orchestra coming first and bring the melody up, and then the solo violin just cover what orchestra played. It has often happened in any classical period music, not just Mozart. But the difference to the normal classical music is, in this concerto, Stravinsky used a lot of unusual chords, which is the composer never used before in the Romanticism and the Classicism. Such as at the very beginning, he put this chord, just played by the solo violin. So this one is an 11. 11 is very, very tricky chord because you can see we have to turn our hand very big. It's very hard for playing, and also it's not beautiful because it's not in harmony. And after this chord, he put this pizzicato. Also 2, 7, and 5. But after these three chords, he suddenly back to the classical, which is the woodwinds, and the brass just play bala bala ba 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 bala bala ba ba ba. Everything is in 6 in 5, and then the violin covered the melody of the orchestra. So it's very classical and baroque. Although the Stravinsky say his concerto is not just focusing on the difficult technique, but obviously this is very hard for any of violinists in the world, and this is one of the reasons why this concerto is still not that popular. He used a lot of very big shifting. You can see a lot of big shifting in the development part. For example, like this. And the harmonies. So this kind of skills, which is not usually used before the new classical music, for example, in the romantic music or the classical music. So for me, in this concerto, and I see most of Stravinsky composed the new classicism music, people say it's more connection with the naturalism, but for me, the more important thing is the form. Stravinsky want to compose by a very classical form, and the nationalism, it just, I think, influence a bit, but it's not the important part, so we can ignore it sometimes. And at the end, I would say, maybe even today, the people still doesn't understand too much about this concerto, because until now, not too many musicians play in public. One of the reasons maybe is tricky, and for the audience, it's hard to accept. But I think in the future, this concerto will be very, very famous and popular, because this is, I would say, is the only new classical style violin concerto in the world. Yeah. So I hope you enjoy the piece sometimes, and thank you.